Hey everyone, today we are going to talk about the role of a CEO, everyone's favorite title. So, what is a CEO? What is the day-to-day life of a CEO? What are the responsibilities? And how does that change depending on the type of organization? So, the word CEO gets, thrown out there a lot. So-and-so is the founder and CEO, so-and-so is the CEO of a multinational company. Sometimes the CEO is the owner. Sometimes the CEO is a shareholder. Almost always the CEO is a shareholder in some case, but is the majority shareholder. Sometimes the CEO, is kind of brought in and has a small share in the company relative to the number of shares out there, but still has a big skin in the game. But so this can all be structured in completely different ways, and the role of a CEO is very much different depending on obviously the type of organization, but the size of the organization as well. So that's what we're going to focus on today. How does the role of a CEO change depending on the size of the organization, and what does the day-to-day look like in the life of a CEO? So personally, I have experience being a CEO of a small company as well as a medium-sized company. I don't have experience being CEO of like a large multinational company, and most people don't, but I've been lucky enough to be around a few of those people and get to know them a little bit and to try to understand what they do on a day-to-day basis, what they think about, what's kind of rolling on their plate on a day-to-day basis, and how they kind of handle it, right? So we're gonna start with kind of like the teeny little company, the little small business, and we're gonna move up to the multinational enterprise and talk a little bit about that. So for a small business, a small company, let's say 1 to 10 people. Okay, we'll define a small business as 1 to 10 people. A CEO's job is really to almost be the business. In many cases, the CEO is the face of the business. They're talking to customers. They are, very close with all the employees or all the people who work for the company. They have very deep insight into every single aspect of the operational components, very hands-on with the marketing component. When you're running a company between 1 to 10 people, you should, kind of in your purview, as they say, there should be every single thing that's happening in the company, because a company of that size, it can, sometimes companies are really lean and they're doing a lot of business with like a small number of people, but at some point you got to grow, and at some point you got to hire more people. So in that 1 to 10 people range, let's say the revenue is between $50,000 a year to $1 million a year, let's say. You really should be on top of almost everything that's happening in your company. You should know exactly, what happened, why it happened. There's obviously going to be issues because every small business has growing pains. Things are not going to be perfect 100% of the time. But the good thing is, when you're small, you do have the time to actually provide more personal service to your customers and to your clients, right? So if something goes wrong, you can make up for it by going the extra mile, by making sure that whatever it is that happened is made right, and you can have more exceptions to your policy. So maybe you give like refunds in certain cases where maybe that where like a big company might say, okay, we have this policy, and this just doesn't make sense for them to kind of build a system for all these like exceptions to happen. So the policy is the policy. Whereas when you're small, you can kind of make decisions on the fly and do little things to make your customers happy that you wouldn't be able to do at a larger size. And so most companies that get to that larger size, the reason they do that is because the reason they're able to achieve that is because when they were much smaller, they were doing the things that made their customers happy, which allowed them to come back. So when they acquired new customers, they always had their old customers, and then their existing customers would also refer them other people, right? So retention and referrals. The 2 R's. You want as much retention as you want. You want as much referrals, and obviously you want to attract and acquire new customers, right? That's really the name of the game for any business, not just a small business, for any business. So when you're small, the CEO is kind of like super on top of everything, right? Now, moving on to a medium-sized business, the CEO's role starts to change. Once you get to, let's say, 10 to 50, I would say like 50 to 200 people, 250 people is still kind of like a medium-sized business. It's like a larger version of a medium-sized business. But the idea is kind of the same. The role is kind of the same. So at that 10 to 50 people range, you've become much more of a recruiter. Not in the sense that you're an HR person, but you have to build a team. You have to build an elite executive team. You have to train your team, and every single part of the business. Even if you bring people in who are specialized, you have to understand, because you're not going to be able to get the respect, which is obviously very important, but also to be able to speak to them and to be able to monitor them, and to assess performance of your executive team and the people below them. Because if you can't actually assess the performance of your executive team, then it's going to be very hard for you to hold them accountable, and then make sure that they're holding the people below them accountable. Because what starts to happen at that 10 to 50 person range is now you're managing people who are managing people who are in some cases also managing people. So there could be 2 or 3 or 4 layers of hierarchy at this point. Okay, so and then at that point it becomes extremely important that every single person knows exactly what their role is. So not just what's expected of them in terms of output, but what's expected of them in terms of the day-to-day processes. It's very important that they understand what to do in every single type of situation, and it's very important that they understand how the streams of communication between them and you, the people below them and them, and as well as cross-departmental communication. It's very important that those structures are built, because if those structures are built, and this is what happens to a lot of companies, this is why a lot of companies never actually make it to that next level, right? Sales and marketing obviously is a big reason, but another reason is because there's never that kind of like cohesiveness. There's never that like fluidity, both downstream as well as collectively across all departments. There's just too many times when things are not clear. There's issues, and then when issues occur, people start to blame each other, and when people start to blame each other, cultural issues happen. When cultural issues happen, people don't have as much loyalty. When people don't have as much loyalty, then you don't end up keeping your people, and when you don't end up keeping your people, then it's going to be very, you're going to spend so much of your time trying to recruit new people, build that team, and you'll never be able to have something where you're actually able to kind of like really focus on growing and scaling that business, not just maintaining it and retaining what you currently have, right? So you don't want to be, and some people are like, they're not looking to grow their business that much, because there's certain things that happen when you grow your business to a certain point. So it's not that every business that doesn't end up becoming like a big company, a huge company, is unsuccessful or it's doing things wrong, because a lot of times the people in charge, the owners and the lead executives, but usually the owners, they don't want it to be this huge company, because there's certain things that come with that. Some people like running a small or medium-sized business. They prefer it. They're not trying to be a multi-millionaire, or a billionaire, or a trillionaire. No one's a trillionaire, but people are trying to be trillionaires. So it's not to say that their business isn't successful if they've been at that place for a while. It's just they're choosing not to, because when you grow, the more you grow, you kind of lose something even if you're very well run, very well managed, you lose kind of that personal side to your business, where especially as like the CEO or the co-founder, you're in touch with like your day-to-day customers, you're in touch with your day-to-day operations. As you get bigger and bigger, more structure, there's a certain level of bureaucracy that is inevitable, and it's essentially, obviously you make a lot more money, you're a lot more successful, but it's really a different world as you get to like the next level, right? So as you get bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's just not something that everyone wants to do. But at that medium level, it's very important that you kind of like set everything up correctly, and it's much easier to actually do that at the small business phase, because if you're doing all this stuff at the bigger phase, it's gonna be way harder, and you're gonna waste a lot of time if you haven't done it correctly to start in this small business level. So instead of trying to grow too much, because there's so much business out there that you can grow very fast, if you're good at sales and marketing, but then if you don't have like good bones to your business, then you're just going to end up in this like hamster wheel, this treadmill, and it's just going to be like very inefficient, and it's going to be it's not going to be as fun as if you just set it up correctly from the beginning. And then when you get to that next level, then everyone knows their role, everyone knows exactly what's going on, and things are just very clear, and you haven't grown too fast, so you have a very good reputation. You've never let quality slip, because if you grow too fast, no matter what business you're in, there will be quality issues, and that will affect your reputation. And these days everything is online, so people can just Google you, they can Google your company, they can Google you, they can Google whoever, and they can basically figure out every single thing about your company, the people you work with, the experience that your customers have had, all that kind of stuff. So you really, more than ever in today's digital age, in today's information age, in today's age where every single's opinion, no matter how unreasonable and how crazy it is, matters, because they can go and post it online, and people are going to read that and think twice. Even when I'm looking to hire people, sometimes I'm looking to hire VAs, top level VAs. It's very hard to find top level VAs, but when I'm looking at reviews and that kind of stuff, it is, VA, by the way, is virtual assistants, people who work overseas. It's very, very, very hard to overlook one super negative review written by someone about that person, even if everything else is great, and it's always going to be in the back of your mind. So when you're very small, you want to try to have like 0 negative reviews online, everything's positive, and then when you get to that medium stage, you've controlled for quality, you haven't grown so fast, it might take a bit longer, but it's going to save you a lot of time and effort down the road. So it not only evens out, it'll benefit you more in a much faster period than if you just kind of grow too fast and you're stuck in like a place for several weeks or months or years, in some cases decades, but usually years. So you really want to kind of get it done correctly. Now moving on to the kind of like the large CEO, large company CEO, big company, let's say more than 250 employees, multiple different markets, multiple different service lines, maybe multiple products. Every business is different, so it's hard to kind of put it all into one box and say this is what a big company looks like, because every company is completely different. But hopefully you get the idea. So at that point, really, most of a CEO's time is just taking meetings with executives, right? There's not as much like quote unquote real work, right? Like the years of real work have kind of passed that person. Not to say that meetings aren't real work, but it's not like, I should kind of frame it more like executional work, right? At that point, when you get to that senior, level of a big company, everything just comes down to decision making, both in terms of like the strategic direction of the business, but also the people who are running in charge, right? Like you are basically assessing the people below you, the people below them, and maybe even the people below them. But you probably don't have enough time to assess the people like 3 levels down the chain. So you're really kind of just looking at like the level below you, the level below them, as well as each individual, department's performance. The service line. Sometimes the people may be great, but that specific division, the product line or service line just isn't the right fit for the market. So you have to assess that. So really, at that point, everyone is just trying to get your time, right? You probably have an executive assistant or 2, depending on how big the company is, that are just putting meetings in your schedule, and you have to decide how to prioritize your time, and who you're going to meet with, why you're meeting with them, and what the outcome is. And you're going to have to report to shareholders unless you're the founder and the only shareholder or one of the major ones. But a lot of CEOs of big companies, they have to report to shareholders, and you're going to have to balance, especially if you're not a majority shareholder, you're going to have to balance what you think is a good medium to long term view with like the immediate kind of shareholders view. And usually when there's less shareholders and the company's not public, it's easier to kind of like operate towards that medium and long-term view. Whereas, huge public companies, they're doing like, quarterly reporting, all this stuff. They're hopping on conference calls every like 3 months and talking to shareholders. And it's really about, what did you do for me, today? And what are you going to do for me tomorrow? And they're not thinking like a week from now or 2 months from now. I mean, not literally a week from now, but like, with that analogy, I'm talking more like 6 months or a year or 2 years or 3 years or 5 years. So, and that's kind of what I mean by, as you get bigger and bigger, you start to lose a little bit of something. You lose that startup energy you have, the startup, kind of hustle that it's more about kind of the long term and the vision, all that kind of stuff. Bigger companies, tend to start to think differently, and they start to, they in some ways become a little bit more short-term focused, and the really good ones are able to kind of maintain that long-term focus with everything they do. Like the really good ones, like the ones that are super, super well respected, and companies that everyone's kind of striving to be. So, and in every industry that's kind of different. I know everyone talks about like the tech ones because in the last 2-3 decades, tech's kind of like the exciting thing that is just in our everyday lives. But it could there's a lot of great companies in every single industry, and the reason those companies are great is because the CEOs, the leaders of those companies have made decisions that obviously benefit those companies in the short run, but also really, 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 really are making decisions that are with a medium to long-term view, both in terms of the market, but as well as in terms of like customer loyalty and all that kind of stuff. So that's a bit of an overview. Again, I don't have first-hand experience running like a huge multinational company. Personally, I've been lucky enough to manage a couple medium-sized companies at the same time, with a few small businesses on the side as well. I just have a bit of ADD. I guess every CEO does, but I like I have a lot of different interests and a lot of different passions and like different types of businesses. So I've chosen to kind of go about my career in that way. But if someone is managing one company and one company only, and they're like the CEO of a big multinational firm, they really are more of just a pure decision maker, and a pure less of a pure operator. So that's a little bit about the life of a CEO. Maybe you have some feedback, maybe I missed on a couple things, maybe you disagree. Put any of your thoughts in the comment below. We're happy to hear what you guys have to say, and any more cool insights about the CEO life.